Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. The Alaska Triangle is a area of deep mystery because there's a lot of people who go missing in that area. It's been happening for a very long time now, since the 1970s. Probably over 20,000 people completely vanished off the face of the earth. They have never been found in all forms, all plane disappearances, just hiking disappearances. A guy it was part of a race, and he running on a mountain, and he disappeared very mysteriously over the decades in this Alaska Triangle. There's been a lot of different disappearances since 1988. There's been over 16,000 people who have disappeared in the Alaska Triangle, and the Alaska Triangle it's bounded by Anchorage, Juneau, and Utqiagvik, which is formerly known as Barrow, and it encompasses tens of thousands of square miles of harsh, remote terrain in Alaska, and that's what it's known for. It's known for its high number of disappearances, and we're going to talk about that, and I have to wonder how many of those disappearances are because of these alien creatures. I would have to assume that probably thousands of them. I mean, if you're looking at over 16,000 people, okay, I get it that some people could go missing for prosaic reasons. They could fall into a hole somewhere, get covered over with snow. They could fall off a cliff, and nobody knows where. Planes could crash, and then they get covered with snow, and nobody knows. They can't find them because they don't know where they went down. So all of those are on the table, of course. But I would imagine that some of those disappearances, because some of those disappearances, I would imagine, are due to these creatures. Because for one thing, the number of disappearances is more than twice anywhere else. I mean, this is an incredible amount of people go missing in this Alaska Triangle. And I'm going to pull up an article here, and we'll talk about it a little bit. Here's an article from the Manual. It says, more people disappear in the Alaska Triangle than anywhere else. Of course, it talks a little bit about the Bermuda Triangle. Of course, there's been a lot of disappearances there, but the Alaska Triangle is a lot scarier, and a lot more disappearances occur in that area. It says the Alaska Triangle and the stories behind it are far more chilling. Surrounded by these sweeping mountains and heavy snowstorms, and infamous for supposed alien abductions, Bigfoot sightings, and paranormal activity, this area has become so intriguing that the Channel Travel even made a series out of it. While I'm slow to believe the paranormal explanations, it's still a bone-chilling mystery that's worth exploring. Yeah, well, I do believe in them because I know that they're here. I've encountered one of these creatures myself. And, of course, we have the absolute proof, too, to go along with it these days. Anyway, the article continues. It says, the borders of the Alaska Triangle connect Anchorage and Juneau in the south to Utqiagvik. It's very hard to pronounce. Along the state's north coast. Like much of Alaska, the Triangle contains some of the most rugged, unforgiving wilderness in North America. It's an impossibly vast expanse of dense boreal forests, craggy mountain peaks, alpine lakes, and large swaths of plain old wilderness. Amid this dramatic backdrop, it's hardly surprising that people go missing. What is surprising, however, is the sheer number of people who go missing. Add to the fact that many disappear without a shred of evidence, and bodies, alive or dead, are rarely found. Yeah, hardly any bodies are ever found. When you go missing in the Alaska Triangle, you'll be lucky if you get your body found. That's what it seems like. And anyway, it says here, interest in the Alaska Triangle began in 1972 when a small private craft carrying United States House Majority Leader Hale Boggs seemingly vanished into thin air somewhere between Juneau and Anchorage. What followed was one of the nation's largest ever search and rescue missions. For more than a month, 50 civilian planes and 40 military craft scoured a search grid of 32,000 square miles, an area larger than the state of Maine. They never found a trace of Boggs, his crew, or his aircraft. So that was one guy that went missing. And here, this guy here, Paul Lamatre, he suffered a similar fate. He was 65 years old, and he competed in his first marathon and was rounding the last point, a mere 200 feet from the finish line. However, between that point where he gave his bib number to a race official and the end, he vanished. Authorities believed he had likely fallen off the marathon's path through the wilderness, yet despite the minuscule area that needed to be searched and the participation of state troopers, mountain rescue experts, and even trained search dogs, not a trace of the man was ever located. Yeah, there was an article about this guy, and it's from thestrangeoutdoors.com. There's a picture of him right there. I guess that picture was taken shortly before he disappeared. Paul Michael Lemaitre from the Mount Marathon race. He disappeared on July 4th, 2012, and he was seen 200 feet away from the finish line, and then he never made it to the finish line. Nobody has any idea what the hell happened to this guy. Of course, I'll leave the links for all of these articles so you can check them out for yourself. And here was another guy. Alan Foster is another example of odd disappearances in the region. In 2013, the expert pilot of nearly 10,000 flight hours vanished from radar soon after takeoff. Neither he nor his aircraft were ever found. He gave no indication of any distress prior to losing contact, and the only oddity beforehand was that he dropped to an altitude of 1,100 feet. And here was another guy, Richard Griffiths. He was an inventor, and he was hoping to prove the worth of his special wilderness survival cocoon. However, after several months of people believing him to be testing his cocoon in the Alaskan wilderness, he was reported missing. The following investigation found that he took a bus toward the White River, a tributary of the Yukon, spent some time in a lodge, and was never seen again. So what happened to these people? I would have to imagine that some of them, probably were killed, like people get killed when they're out in the wilderness, I'm sure. And some of them may have been taken by these alien beings for who knows what purpose. Were they mutilated, perhaps, like the way cattle get mutilated? Could be. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Anyway, it says here, given the sheer size of the triangle, it's easy to chalk up its mysteries to the perils of traveling through an inhospitable landscape. Alaska is big, at more than twice the size of Texas. It's huge, actually, and most of the state is still entirely uninhabited by people, with rugged mountains and dense forests. Finding a missing person in the Alaskan wilderness isn't like finding a needle in a haystack. It's like finding a specific molecule in a haystack. By the numbers, it seems something more interesting might be at play. More than 16,000 people, think about that, 16,000 people, including airline passengers and hikers, locals, and tourists, have disappeared within the Alaska Triangle since 1988. The rate per 1,000 people is more than twice the national missing persons average, and the rate of people who are never found is even higher. Many people think that the numbers imply that something else is going on here other than merely getting lost in the mountains, and I have to agree. I think that something else is going on there, because here's the deal, folks, is that we know that there's something there's something here, right? We know that. We know for a fact that there's something here, right? So yeah, that's what it is. That's probably in some of these cases with some of these people that go missing, like in places like the Alaska Triangle, where you're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, this is a perfect opportunity for these people, for these creatures, these aliens, whatever they are, to steal some of us, to kidnap us for keeps, forever, for whatever purpose they want. And who knows what those purposes are? We really don't know. Anyway, this guy concludes, I'm not going to read this entire article, but he concludes it this way. He says, in the end, the Alaska Triangle's mysteries are likely a mix of natural dangers and human error. Despite that, paranormal theories and mythical stories are fun to speculate about, so the region still retains much of its allure. Whether you view it as a natural hazard zone or a hotspot for supernatural phenomena, the Alaska Triangle stretches our understanding of the world and remains a place of intrigue for skeptics and believers alike. Yeah, it does. And we're never going to get to the bottom of a lot of these mysteries. We're just not. It's never going to happen. Maybe some things will be found over time, but highly unlikely, very highly unlikely. Some of the people in that area, actually, some of the locals, they believe that that there's weird creatures that live there that are shapeshifters. According to the article, it says some believe that the Alaska Triangle contains energy vortexes, or places where electromagnetic energy is so concentrated that it leads to disruptions in navigation, time, or even space. Others speculate alien activity. This area is a hotspot for UFO sightings, so some believe that extraterrestrial beings may be responsible. A few even swear of Bigfoot sightings. Yeah, there's a lot of Bigfoot sightings in this area as well. And of course, we were just talking in the previous show about a pilot that was flying near a volcano in Alaska, and with passengers, and they were seeing some weird objects hovering around this volcano, hiding in clouds and things like that. I mean, there's things people see there all the time. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in Alaska, and I could understand why, actually, because it would be a place for these creatures to operate without being too concerned about the prying eyes of people for the most part. And when the prying eyes do show up, they could just take them and use them as whatever they want. They could use them for their experiments or whatever. Who knows? Maybe, or for nourishment. Maybe they're mutilating people in that area, just like they mutilate cattle in other parts of the world, and drain their blood, just like in other parts of the world. Maybe that's what's happening. It says here, even the indigenous Tlingit people tell stories of spiritual gateways or portals, as well as shape-shifting demons called the Ushtaka. The Kushtaka, said to lure travelers to their doom. This huge otter-like creature can shapeshift into human form in order to ensnare its victims. That actually sounds a lot like a Hindu creature called Rakshasa, which was actually featured in an old Night Stalker, Kolchak the Night Stalker episode. There was this monster that could make itself look like anything at once, somebody who you trust, and then when you get close to it, it kills you. And that thing was called a Rakshasa, and that's a Hindu being that's featured prominently in their Hindu folklore. So I guess that the Rakshasa would be similar to the Kushtaka, which is able to shapeshift and then kill people. But we don't know about that. But here's what we do know: we do know that we're not alone in this world. That's one thing that we do know, and you have to come up with some culprits behind these disappearances. And I would think that the perfect culprits are these alien creatures. In a lot of cases, I mean, we talked about strange disappearances where people go out hunting and then never seen again, or on a nature walk and then they're never seen again. And those instances could involve alien creatures kidnapping those people and killing them, using them for experimentation purposes, or who knows what. We have no idea. Maybe for food purposes. Maybe they're drinking the blood of people, just like they possibly drink the blood from cattle that they kill. Maybe that's what they're doing to people too. In fact, I did receive a message recently from one of my subscribers on Spotify who thought that I should talk about human mutilations, because I don't talk about that enough. And so with what we're talking about today in mind, the disappearances in Anchorage, maybe that's what's going on there. Maybe there's people that are being killed by these beings there, and it's just an easy place for it to happen, because who's going to know better? The aliens know that, no one's ever going to find anyone here. They'll just think that they disappeared. Really, we're going to drain their blood and then hide their remains or whatever. Maybe dump them in a volcano, like some people believe. But yeah, this was from one of my subscribers named Suhaib Ruhi. Says, hello, James. Can you do an episode about the human mutilations that you can read about it in the badaliens.info? Yeah, there was a link here, badaliens.info. I'm not going to leave that link in the description, because I'm just going to tell you what it is here on the show, and I'm going to warn you. Only go there if you're not easily offended by grotesque imagery, because it does have some imagery on there that's very, very disturbing, with people that were mutilated apparently by aliens, and it's not pleasant to look at all. So I'm not going to leave that link, but I will tell you about it. It's badaliens.info. And this person says, I really want to know your perspective about this overlooked part of the NHI phenomenon that's a lot of researchers seem to ignore it. Yeah, a lot of people do ignore it, because it is one of them topics that nobody really wants to talk about. And on that website that this person was talking about, this badaliens.info, there was a lot of different cases on there. Of course, like I said, I'm not going to show any of the pictures from there because they're too grotesque. I mean, horrible, and really no explanation for it. And a lot of them, there's a lot more than I thought, actually. But here was a case, we could talk about this one. There were no pictures along with this one, so we're going to talk about this case from, it says here, pre-1994, possibly South America. And it says here, UFO researcher Karen Lister recounts an experience back in New Zealand in 1994. And it says, let me set the scene. Back in and this was this Karen Lister, this was her experience. She says, back in 1994, I was approached by a physician living here in New Zealand who wished to meet me meet with me to get my opinion on something that had been disturbing him for some time. He refused to tell me what the matter was about and kept insisting he needed to show me something. I have had my share of cranks over the years, and I would have relegated this individual into that category if it weren't for something in his voice and manner that conveyed the honest conviction of his request. I asked him to meet me at my home, but he preferred not to, and instead chose a little cafe in the center of town as our meeting place. He did give me his name, and at that particular time he had retired from the medical profession. I arrived at the cafe at 12:30, and since he had told me to go to the back, that is where I headed for. Being lunchtime, the cafe was nearly full, and as I walked past the tables to the rear, I saw a man who was sitting alone facing my direction get up and move toward me. He obviously knew who I was, as there was no hesitation in his eye contact with me, nor his stride toward me. He introduced himself and gestured for me to join him at his table. There were only 2 seats at the table, one facing the wall and the other one facing opposite, which meant I would have had my back to the wall. I began to take the seat nearest to me, which meant that I would have been facing the wall. He quickly gestured that he didn't want me sitting there and asked me to change seats. At that moment, I didn't understand why on earth he wanted that, but the look on his face told me he had a reason for asking this of me. Later, of course, I realized that by sitting with my back to the wall with no one behind me gave me the opportunity to view what he had brought to show me without the risk of others being able to see what I was looking at. After we were both seated, he thanked me for meeting with him. He then proceeded to tell me how he had recently come back from a trip to the United States, where during that time he had stayed with another physician friend of his who worked for the United States military. They had been friends and colleagues for a number of years. He proceeded to tell me that during the visit his friend had seemed extremely agitated and wasn't his normal self at all. Something weighted heavily on this man's mind. 3 days into this stay, they were having dinner, and his friend had been drinking heavily, which was something strange in itself, as he had not seen his friend ever take more than a glass or 2 of wine in the entire time they had known each other. As the evening progressed, his friend had started discussing how he had recently seen something very disturbing to him and needed to share this with him. He said he had been working late one night at the base where he was stationed when he was told there had been an accident and they were bringing in a body to which he was to do a preliminary examination of. He then proceeded to detail the night's events and how the body was brought in with horrific injuries, the likes he had never seen before in all the years of his medical career. He said the body had been mutilated, an eye was missing, an ear. Photos had been taken of the victim and he had been found, and these photos accompanied the body. 2 of these photos the physician had managed to secure for himself. It was these 2 photos that he brought out to show his friend, and it was the same 2 photos that were now in the possession of the physician who sat opposite me in the cafe during that busy, bustling lunchtime. He told me that his friend had asked him to hold on to the photos in case anything happened to him, as he just didn't feel safe anymore, and besides he hated having them around. I listened to what was being told me with very little interruption until he had mentioned that the photos were now in his possession. I asked him whether he had them on him, and he nodded in the affirmative. Now, I have seen alleged human mutilation photos before, once by a colleague who had shown me 2 photos of a naked man's body with the classic signs that accompany the cattle mutilations that I am very familiar with. I have also seen a photo in one of the UFO magazines. I now realize why I had been asked to sit with my back to the wall. This way I could view them without anyone else seeing what I was looking at. Before he handed me the photos, he asked me if I had studied many cases of cattle mutilation and if I could possibly tell the difference from an ordinary wound and one that had the traits of being a mutilation. I explained to him that nothing was a certainty in this field, but I had seen hundreds of cases and read all the reports, including the autopsy notes, so was very familiar with the wounds sustained in an alleged mutilation case. He seemed satisfied with the answer and so brought out the photos from his breast pocket and handed them to me in a white envelope. Now, since I was unable to keep the photos or make detailed notes of them at the time of viewing, the following account of what was in the photos is from the mental note I made of them, trying to remember as much detail as I possibly could. There were 2 photos. The first was the full frontal of a white male, and the second photo was the same male that had been turned on his stomach, so this was the other side of the victim. The photos had been taken in a field of lush green pasture. It was difficult to determine how old he was, as the face had been so disfigured that age could not be determined that way. However, the physical appearance of the body was in quite good shape, so I estimate that he was between the age of 20 and 35. His facial injuries were almost exactly what I had seen time and time again in the cattle mutilation cases. His left eye had been surgically removed, including the eyelid. His lips had been removed in a very clean and precise cut. So had his left ear, and the left side of his jaw had been removed, taking part of the jawbone and teeth with it. The incision along the jawline had extended past the removed segment of jawbone to include a further strip of tissue that stopped about 2.5 inches from the base of the chin. I could see no blood at all. No blood around the wounds, no blood on the ground, no blood anywhere. Next, I looked at the torso and saw 2 very clean cookie cutter pieces that had been removed from the chest area. These would have measured approximately 2 inches in diameter. Let me just stop there for a second. Yeah, sometimes they have these cookie cutter incisions, like these marks like cut out of the bodies of the cattle, and they call them cookie cutter slices. Cookie cutter pieces, because that's what they look like a cookie cutter made the marks and did the cutting. But anyway, it says here, again, no blood could be seen around the wound area. I have often wondered about the lack of blood in the animal cases that I have seen pictures of. I wondered if there was blood, but that it was just harder to see due to the sometimes matted, dirty hide/hair of the animal. In this case, however, with the victim being human, if there had been spillage of blood, there certainly was no trace of it. From what I could see, it had either been cleaned away or wasn't there in the first place. I moved down the photo to the genital area. The sexual organs had been completely removed. Again, no blood was visible. There appeared to be no injuries to the legs that I could see, so I went on to the second photograph. The only injury on the second photo was that the entire rectum had been completely cored out, which left a very large cavity. This was a very familiar sight, as most cattle mutilations have exactly the same thing. If you haven't seen this before, then it's much like taking an apple and using a corer to remove the inside core or pips. You are left with an extremely clean incision, and the core has been plugged right out. I remember sitting there and saying in a very low murmur, God, I hope this poor bastard was dead before they did this. Of course, that is the bottom line here. Just who are they? Yeah, you got to stop, and I'm going to stop there for a second. Yeah, you got to hope that, if this is really what's happening, if some people are getting mutilated the same way some of these cattle are getting mutilated, I really hope, for the sake of the cattle and for these people, right, that they don't even know what's happening, that they're conked out or something. But who knows? Maybe they're not. Maybe everything that happens to them during these procedures or whatever they are, they could be completely alive when it starts, and they die during the course of it. Who knows? It's gruesome to think about, but it's something we need to face. Something that we need to start talking about. Like some people, it is. This is a topic. The human mutilation aspect to this whole phenomenon is something that people do not like talking about. And in fact, it seems like when there are missing person cases, sometimes there are government officials that get involved, and it makes you wonder if that's what they're concerned about. They're concerned about a body showing up or turning up, being found mutilated, and they want to make sure that they're there to cover it up if that does happen, if that is the case. You would have to think that is probably something that they want to keep under wraps. They don't want people to know that this is happening, that this could happen, and it could happen to anybody, depending on how unlucky you are. Anyway, continuing here, it says, after I had looked at the pictures for quite some time, I looked up at the physician opposite me, and I could see from the look on his face that he had become rather resigned. I suppose he was hoping I would tell him that these photos bore no resemblance whatsoever to the cattle mutilations. Unfortunately, I couldn't do that, as what I was looking at resembled 100% of what I'd seen with the animal mutilation cases. We sat there and discussed things for quite some time. He didn't seem all that interested in telling much more about his friend to whom the photos actually belonged to. It seemed to me that something in him had crossed over to the darker side of human existence, the side that knows something they wish to hell they didn't. I felt sad for him. I know that feeling well. We said our goodbyes, and I haven't seen or heard from him since. This person who wrote this says, I was fortunate to speak to Karen recently regarding this case, and she says he wouldn't tell me where they were taken, but from the uniforms, assuming a security/police force, they didn't look like they were from the USA. Somewhere like South America is all I can really say. So the uniforms that people were wearing in the pictures, they look like they may have been South American military uniforms and not American, even though the guy said that he was talking to an American about this. Who knows? But if you go to this site that I told you about, badaliens.info, you'll see there's a section about human mutilations, and they have some very horrendous looking images here. And I'm not going to put any of them on my podcast. This is something for people to check out on their own if they even want to see something like this. I could tell you that I wish I didn't see it, be quite honest with you. It's not something you want to have emblazoned into your brain cells. I can just tell you that. I'm just throwing that out as a warning. But if you could handle it, check it out. Badaliens.info. Yeah, wow, woo. So is that what's going on? Is that what's happening with all these disappearances? Is that what happens to a lot of the people that disappear in the Alaska Triangle? Do they end up the same fate as a lot of cattle end up for some reason? Is that what's going on? Are the creatures here not only to live off the blood of the animals that we have on this planet, but they're here also to live off our blood? Maybe. It could be. It really could be. We don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to that, but it very well could be. And these people that go 16,000 people since 1988 in Anchorage, in the Alaska Triangle. Okay, 16,000. Let's think about that. That's a big number over a 37-year period. That's a very large number. I would have to imagine again that some of those, let's say 1,000 of those people, 1,000 of the 6,000 taken by aliens or more. Who knows? We really don't know. I don't know what kind of number to assign to it, but I would imagine that some of those thousands were actually people that encountered non-human intelligence, and that was the end for them. When they had that encounter, that was the last thing they ever knew. Possibly, we don't know, but I think it is. I think that's probably what it comes down to. And then you look at if you're going to have these creatures mutilating our cattle, and then there's human bodies that are found in the similar condition. They're obviously not just doing it to cattle and other animals. They're doing it to human beings as well. So yeah. That could be one of the reasons for the cover-up as well, when you really think about it. If that's something they don't want to talk about. Of course, this is going to be something that crops up. I mean, the second that you have any sort of disclosure, right, from anybody in the government, there's going to be a lot of questions that are going to start flying shortly thereafter. People are going to start asking about alien abductions. People are going to start asking about alien implants. Is that all real? People are going to start asking about cattle mutilations. And then people are going to start asking about the people who just disappear, and then people are going to put two and two together and realize, wait a minute, what about human mutilation? So they're doing that to us too. See, that's one of the reasons. It's just a snowball effect, and it just becomes more reasons for chaos and panic. That's from the position that the secret control group is in. That's what they're probably thinking to themselves. Not only are they going to be called out as liars and people who maintained this cover-up for decades, but they're also going to be called out for keeping this from the public for all these years, and people are going to want answers. Don't you know anything about this? Is there anything we can do to stop this from happening? There's going to be all kinds of stuff that happens that people start issuing concerns about once any sort of government disclosure occurs. So I believe that's one of the reasons that's stopping it, because there are just too many unanswered questions. And the other thing is that there are answers. I think that we have to look at this and say, this is the answer for some disappearances. Some people are being taken by these beings and they're being killed by them for some reason. We don't know why, whether it's for food or for some experimentation purposes, we really don't know. But this is probably something else that has to be a major concern for those who are in the know, that this is what these beings are doing, this is what they're up to. And sometimes when people disappear, it's because of these creatures, and some people, unfortunately, are being killed by them horribly. That's what it seems like. And this is probably one of the big reasons why they don't want to talk about this, why governments want to keep this a secret, because they're concerned about how the world will react to this reality. It would just be too much. Now, here's what I have to say about that. I say, we already have a lot of problems in this. There's a lot of things out there that could already kill us. You could be out in the woods, you could be mauled to death by a bear. You could be swimming in the ocean and you could be attacked by a shark, or who knows. You could be get killed by piranha fish somewhere, in South America somewhere. I mean, there's all kinds of horrible things that could happen to a person, and this is just another one. It's just another thing that could happen. And that's how we need to look at it. It's just like, okay, so there's another way we can die, and it's horrible and everything. Yeah, hopefully it doesn't happen to me. Hopefully we could stop at some point, but we shouldn't be panicking over these kinds of things or be overly concerned about them. It's just another thing to worry about. It's just another aspect to this whole existence, like I like to say sometimes. Anyway, I want to say this. I want to say thank you all for joining me today. Until next time.